The sound hit my chest like a physical punch. To the execution squad raising their rifles, the Alpha King was just a feral monster roaring to be put down. But when I looked into his golden eyes, I didn't hear a beast. I heard grammar. I heard syntax. He wasn't snarling in rage. He was screaming for help in a language only I could understand. Thunder didn't scare her. The silence did. Dean Miller sat across the mahogany desk, a squeezed lemon in a cheap suit. He radiated sourness. The air between them felt pressurized, heavy. "You're finished, Verity." His voice carried the wet slap of a dead fish hitting a counter. Verity stared down at her hands. A slight tremor rattled her fingertips. She gripped the cassette tape until the cracked plastic dug into her skin. She jammed a pencil into the sprocket, twisting. Scritch, scritch. The brown ribbon tightened. This was her thesis, her proof. "I know what I heard." Her throat constricted, dry as sand. "It wasn't just growling, Dean. It was syntax, grammar. It was a dog barking at a squirrel." Miller sipped his tea. The steam drifted across the desk, carrying the stench of wet cardboard and molding leaves. Verity's stomach lurched at the smell. "It's a language." She wound the tape harder, faster, snap. The pencil slipped. The magnetic ribbon severed, fluttering uselessly against the casing. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Gone. The proof, the career, the future, ruined in a heartbeat. "You are embarrassing this university." Miller rose from his chair and stalked to the window. Rain smeared the glass, turning the world into a cage of gray bars. "You hear things that aren't there, patterns in the noise. It's called delusion, Verity, not science." A drawer slid open. The sound cut through the room like a knife being drawn from a sheath. Verity pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "I'm not crazy." The words trembled, but her chin stayed up. Miller dropped a black folder onto the desk. A heavy, dusty thud sent motes dancing in the harsh fluorescent light. "There is one option left." He didn't sound happy. He sounded like an executioner reading a verdict. "The High Council reached out. They have a situation." Oxygen left the room. The council, the shadow government, the hunters. "What kind of situation?" "A prisoner, a high-value target. They need a translator, someone who specializes in primal linguistics." Primal linguistics, a polite academic term for monster talk. "Why me?" "Because nobody else will go near him." Miller turned, eyes hard as flint. The last 3 translators didn't quit Verity. They were eaten. The room spun. Verity looked at the black folder. Thick. Leather-bound. The label read, Subject 0. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run. Walk out into the rain, blend into the coffee shop crowds, be normal. Then the vibration hit her. Not the rain, not the dean's wheezing breath. A hum. A low resonant frequency emanating from the leather file. Her ears, mutated and sharp, picked up the structure instantly. The air around the folder buzzed with a pattern she had never encountered. It wasn't noise. It was a song. A melody of isolation and rage. Her hand moved on its own. Fingertips brushed the cold, textured leather. "I'll take it." Miller blinked. "Did you hear me? I said he eats people." "I heard you." Verity snatched the file, pulling it against her chest. Body heat radiated from the paper, warming her through her blouse. "But silence is louder than screaming, Dean, and I'm tired of being quiet." She turned on her heel. Her boots squeaked against the linoleum, a sharp sound of departure. She didn't look back at the broken tape. The door closed behind her, sealing her fate.
The silence was a lie. Bastian sat in the center of the cell, a statue carved from rage and granite. But inside his skull, a hurricane raged. Humans called this glass box soundproof. Idiots. To Bastian, the world never stopped screaming. Electricity buzzed in the walls, a swarm of angry bees crawling under his skin. Zisht, zisht. 30 feet away, 2 hearts beat in distinct, sickening rhythms. Thump, thump. The guard on the left tasted of adrenaline and terror. The one on the right smelled of stale ham and hunger. New girl coming today. The hungry guard's voice grated like sandpaper on glass. Doesn't matter. The scared one shifted his weight, leather holster creaking. He'll break her, like the others. Bastian kept his eyes closed. His wolf clawed at his ribs, desperate to hunt. It wanted to shatter the reinforced glass and remind them why he was king. But the hunger in his gut was sharper than violence. 5 years of screaming into the void. He pushed complex thoughts, strategies, poetry into the air. And the humans only heard growls. They called him feral, the silenced. He was a man drowning in a sea of the deaf. Then the air shifted. A scent hit him. Not the antiseptic sting of bleach, not the copper tang of blood. Rain, old paper, and fear. But not the sour, rotting fear of the guards. This was spicy, electric, brave. Footsteps clicked down the hallway, light, hesitant, coming closer. Bastian's eyes snapped open. Gold drowned out the white. His vision shifted to thermal, the world becoming a map of heat and cold. A glowing signature approached the heavy steel door. He stood. Tungsten chains rattled on his wrists, heavy enough to anchor a tank. He ignored the drag. He moved to the glass, pressing a palm against the cold surface. His claws dragged down the pane. Scree. The scent thickened, flooded his lungs. The steel door groaned open. Light spilled in, blinding and harsh. And there she was, small, fragile. A coat 2 sizes too big, swallowing her frame. She clutched a black file like a shield. The wolf inside him stopped clawing. It went deadly still. It didn't want to kill her. It wanted to breathe her in. For the first time in 5 years, the static in his head died. The electricity faded. The heartbeats dulled. Quiet. Finally quiet. She looked up. Brown eyes locked onto his through the glass. Wide. Terrified. A jolt slammed through Bastian's chest, hot as a lightning strike. He didn't roar. He didn't smash the barrier. He tilted his head. He pushed a thought toward her. A test. A single complex phoneme in the old tongue. I see you. A low clicking chitter rolled from his throat. Kick, 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 click. The guards flinched, hands flying to stun batons. But the girl did the impossible. She stepped forward. The world narrowed to the space between them. She dropped her bag. She walked to the glass, close enough that her breath fogged the surface. She didn't look at his teeth. She looked at his throat. She was watching. The vibration. Bastian realized the truth, and it terrified him more than death. She heard him, and she let it happen.
The airlock tasted of copper and old batteries. Verity stood in the steel chamber. Cold bit through her coat, turning her breath into white ghosts. A heavy weight hit her chest. Industrial black headphones. Put these on. The guard spat on the floor. Unless you want your eardrums liquefied. The last girl bled from her eyes. Verity gripped the cold plastic. Why? Because he's loud. Silence followed. Heavy, physical. Verity looked through the thick, scratched glass. Bastian waited. No pacing, no roaring, just stillness. He sat on the concrete floor, legs stretched out, a king on a throne of isolation. But his eyes were burning gold, and they were locked on hers. Gravity pulled her forward. She stepped to the glass. Headset, now. The guard grabbed the inner seal handle. You got 10 minutes before he decides to kill you. Verity slid the cups over her ears, the world muffled to a dull thrum. Just her own heartbeat. Bastian's lip curled, not a snarl, a smirk. Arrogant, knowing. He tapped his own ear. He knew. Anger flared in Verity's chest, hot and sharp. Why was everyone so afraid of a sound? Why treat communication like a bomb? She gripped the cord. Her pulse hammered against the rubber casing. You can't translate if you're deaf. She yanked the plug. The vibration hit her, not a roar, not a scream. a bass note so low it rattled her teeth. It traveled up through the soles of her boots and shook the buttons on her coat. The air thickened, heavy as water. Verity gasped. The headphones clattered to the floor. Bastian stood, a blur of motion, 1 second seated, the next a wall of muscle and heat pressed against the glass. He didn't attack the barrier. He opened his mouth. Static filled the room, a radio between stations, but inside the noise. Structure, subject, verb, object, pressure built in her chest. Dense, aching. You... She pressed a palm to the vibrating glass. You aren't growling. You're asking. A hand grabbed her shoulder. He's ramping. Up! Get back! Verity dug her heels in. She leaned closer to the monster. Bastian wasn't trying to break the glass. He was trying to break the silence.
That was the only explanation. The others reeked of sour sweat and urine. They shook. They hid. This one flooded his senses. Lavender and iron. A sword wrapped in a flower. She had fought the guard. She had argued for entry. And now the glass was gone. Just 6 feet of charged air stood between them. Bastian smelled the blood rushing in her veins. Whoosh, whoosh, sweet, fragile. He could snap her neck before she drew her next breath. He could tear her throat out. The wolf stayed silent. She held a plastic tablet and a silver stylus like a weapon. Talk to me. Her voice trembled. Tiny tremors. Please. She looked at him like a puzzle, not a monster. He would test that. Human words were mud, thick, slow. Bastian switched to the wolf tongue, the evolved syntax. A low roll thundered from his chest. The stone is cold, but the chains are warm because they drink my heat. Her hand flew across the tablet. Scritch, scratch, desperate phonetics. He accelerated. Why hold the plastic when your hands shake? She frowned. She scribbled faster. A vein pulsed in her forehead. He pushed harder. He poured time and loss into the air. The sound vibrated the walls. The lights flickered. The girl cried out. Snap. The silver stylus broke in two. The tablet clattered to the concrete. Silence stretched. She failed, just like the others. Her tools were too small. Her mind was too human. Bastian turned away. Disappointment tasted like ash. He would die alone in this box. Then, a touch. Warm, soft, shocking. Small hands landed on his throat, right over the vocal cords. He froze. His wolf snarled in surprise. Kill her! But he didn't. He looked down. She stood on her tiptoes, eyes closed, wrapping her fingers around the source of the sound. I can't write it. Breathless. It's too fast, but I can feel it. Her terror rolled off her in waves, but she didn't let go. Something in Bastian clicked open. For the first time, someone wasn't trying to shut him up. She was trying to turn up the volume. The bond pulsed under her fingertips. She wasn't a translator. She was a microphone. And he was about to sing.
The world didn't explode with fire. It detonated with sound. Verity's palms fused to the column of his throat. The vibration wasn't noise anymore. It was a physical assault. A shockwave traveled up her arms, rattling the marrow in her bones. Thrum, thrum. Touching him was grabbing a live wire. Air pressure dropped. The steel seal hissed open behind her. Get away from him! The shout came through water. Verity dug her fingers in. To let go was to drown in the silence again. And the silence was lonely. Gloves grabbed her shoulders, hard, rough. They yanked her back. Boots skidded on concrete. The connection severed. The warmth vanished, leaving her freezing. Chaos erupted. 2 riot guards swarmed the cell. Electric batons painted the air with blue sparks. Zap, crack. Back! Get back, subject! Bastian didn't flinch. His chest heaved, a bellows fueling a fire. Golden eyes locked on her, not angry, desperate. His lips parted. Click, shh, tuck, a message. A shove sent Verity sprawling. Into the airlock. The glass door slammed. Boom! She hit the floor. Her legs collapsed. Oxygen refused to enter her lungs. Her hands shook uncontrollably. She stared at her palms, red, buzzing, not burned, electrified. Debris littered the floor. The snapped stylus, the cracked tablet. Truth hit her like a physical blow. The pens, the recorders, the charts, toys, useless plastic toys. You don't catch a hurricane in a butterfly net. Writing the sounds was a mistake. She needed to survive them. A terrifying clarity took hold. That last sound? Click, shh, tick, fast, sharp, urgent, a warning. Decontamination mist hissed from the ceiling, cold and chemical. It burned her eyes with the stench of industrial bleach. But it couldn't wash away the ghost of his skin under her fingertips. Verity wiped the chemicals from her face. She forced herself to stand. She wasn't going to quit. He wasn't feral. He was just too loud for a quiet world. And she was the only one with the volume control.
Ozone and burnt hair choked the cell. Batten struck his ribs. Crack. Electric currents chewed his nerves. He didn't care. His throat still burned where she touched him. Phantom heat. 2 small handprints branded into his flesh. Fire and lavender. Through the glass, the airlock stood empty. She was gone. The council didn't forgive mistakes. She touched the weapon. She proved the trigger worked. Bastion paced. 3 steps. Turn. 3 steps. Turn. The wolf mirrored him, clawing the inside of his chest. She is small. She breaks easy. Bastion ground his teeth together. Click, shh, tick. The message had been simple. They are listening. But her eyes haunted him. Brown. Wet. Not scared of him, scared for him. The observation deck door slid open. Councilman Thorne. The man reeked of expensive cologne, masking the scent of moral rot. A gray suit costing more than the cage stood behind the safety glass. Thorne smiled. A shark showing its teeth. Bastion went still as stone. Interesting. Thorne's voice scratched through the tinny intercom. She didn't bleed out. The others? Brains melted. But she survived. Thorne tapped the glass. Tap, tap. It seems we found a filter for your noise, King. Rage flooded Bastion's veins. He wanted to shatter the glass, rip the man's throat out with his teeth. He stayed motionless. Let the shark think he won. We will use her, Thorne said. She will translate your secrets, and then we will dispose of her. Thorne turned. The door sealed. Darkness swallowed the room. Silence returned, but Bastion made a promise in the dark. They saw a tool, a filter, disposable debris. They were wrong. He would teach her, not just the syntax, the power. If she was going to be his voice, she needed to learn how to scream.
The archives tasted of dust, old secrets, and dry paper. A heavy blanket of silence pressed against Verity's eardrums. The room was freezing, her breath misting in white puffs. Puff, puff. The only light bled from the blinking green eyes of the server towers. Blink, blink, they hummed, a low electric buzz that made her teeth itch. She wasn't supposed to be here. She typed faster. Click, clack, click. Fingers flew across the plastic keys. Containment logs. City power grid. She dragged the windows together. Her heart skipped a beat. 2 lines jagged across the screen. Red and blue. Red, Bastion. Every time they tested him. Every scream. Blue, the city's defense grid. Verity gasped. They matched perfectly. Every roar was a power spike. They weren't just holding him. They were harvesting him. Using his voice, his pain to charge their sonic cannons. She zoomed in on last Tuesday. The pattern wasn't a roar. It was a frequency. A command frequency, not a gun. A leash. For the whole city. Oh no. The whisper vanished into the hum of the servers. Lights flickered. Zzzzt. Darkness. Absolute. Heavy. The door hissed open behind her. Whoosh. A shadow fell across her desk. Long. Thin. smelling of expensive cologne and rotting meat. Verity spun. Her chair squeaked. Scree. Councilman Thorne stood there. No smile. Just a shark watching prey. He held a small silver device. "You are very clever, Miss Thorne." His voice was oil on water. Smooth, toxic. Too clever for your own good. Verity crumpled the printout in her fist. The paper crinkled. "You're torturing him." Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. "You're weaponizing him." Thorne stepped closer. Click, click. Shoes on tile. "We are optimizing him. He is a resource, like coal, like oil." Verity backed up until the cold metal of the server rack bit into her spine. "He's a person," Thorne laughed. "Dry, dusty. He is a feral dog. And you? You were just the chew toy we gave him to keep him busy." Truth hit her like a slap. She wasn't going to get fired. She was going to disappear. Thorne pressed a button on the silver device. Click. The door locked. A heavy magnetic thud. "I'm afraid your clearance has been revoked." She was trapped, alone in the dark with the monster's keeper.
The space between them burned. Bastion paced. Claws clicked on stone. Click, click. A rhythm of violence. Something was wrong. The world narrowed. He ignored the guards. He ignored the hum of the electric fence. He reached out with his mind. Reached for the Vocox girl. Verity. Usually, she was a small, warm hum in the back of his head. A candle in a dark room. The candle flickered. Dimmed. Fear. Cold sweat and sharp adrenaline. Her fear. The wolf snarled, ripping at his insides. Mate is in danger. Bastion threw himself at the glass. Thud. The reinforced pane groaned. A spiderweb crack appeared in the corner. Crack. Back. Hit him. Pain. A sonic whine blasted from the speakers. Scree. Hot needles stabbed into his brain. Bastion fell to his knees. He roared. He didn't stop reaching. He pushed a thought through the agony. A question. Verity? Silence. Heavy. Dead. The cell door opened. 2 men in white lab coats pushed a cart. On it sat a large metal collar pulsing with blue light. The silencer. They weren't just going to hurt him. They were going to mute him. Permanently. "Get it on him," one man said. "Thorne wants him quiet before the trial tomorrow." Thorne found her. Thorne knew she was the key. So, Thorne was removing the lock. Bastion looked at the crack in the glass. Small. Enough. He didn't fight. He let them approach, let them think he was broken. Muscles coiled tight. Steel springs ready to snap. The man reached out with the collar. Bastion moved. He focused on the man's earpiece. The radio. He didn't scream with his throat. He screamed with his mind. He pushed a feedback loop of raw, chaotic syntax directly into the frequency. Screesh. The man screamed. Dropped the collar. Clawed at his ear, blood trickling down his neck. Bastion stood. He looked at the camera in the corner. He knew Thorne was watching. He bared his teeth. No translator needed. Touch her, and I will burn this city to ash.
The room reeked of stale coffee and cold sweat. Verity sat in the bolted metal chair. Plastic zip ties bit into her wrists, stinging and tight. Across the steel table, Councilman Thorne sat perfectly still. Not a monster. A banker. Clean suit, manicured nails, dead eyes. The silence screamed. Paper hissed across the metal. Shk. A cashier's check. Verity stared at the numbers. More zeros than she had ever seen. Enough to buy a new identity, a new life, a new silence. Thorne tapped the paper. "It's very simple, Verity. Sign the affidavit. Declare him feral. Declare him unsalvageable." The zeros blurred. A cold, slippery temptation coiled in her gut. She could leave, walk out, go back to her small apartment and her broken thesis, and forget the golden eyes that looked at her like she was the only star in the sky. Her breath hitched. "And if I don't," Thorne sighed, a disappointed father whose child failed a test. Then you become collateral damage. We execute the beast. At dawn. And accidents happen in the containment wing. Gas leaks, electrical fires. The walls closed in. The room shrank. Verity looked at the check. A golden parachute. Heavy. Then she remembered the sound. Not the roar. The hum. The vibration of Bastian's throat under her fingertips. He hadn't tried to kill her. He tried to save her. He wasn't the monster. Thorn was. A laugh bubbled up in her throat. Jagged. Hysterical. You don't get it. She leaned forward. The zip ties dug deeper. You think he's just noise. You think he's static. Thorn raised a brow. He is a weapon, my dear. Nothing more. No. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Thump, thump, thump. He's a library. He's a living history. And you... She glared at the check. You're just the mute button. Verity lunged. She couldn't reach the shredder. She reached the truth. She clamped her teeth onto the check. Thorn's eyes went wide. What are you doing? She bit down, hard. She tore her head back. Rip! Paper gave way. She spit the piece onto the table. Then she tore it again. And again. Confetti rained on the steel. The space between them burned. Thorn stood up. His chair screeched against the floor. Scree! His face flushed red. Ugly. You stupid girl. He leaned over her. You just signed his death warrant, and yours. Verity looked up. Terror trembled in her hands, but her spine was steel. I didn't sign anything. Now, get out of my face. Thorn pressed a button on the wall. The heavy door unlocked. 2 guards stepped in. Take her to the holding cells. Thorn didn't look at her. He stared at the shredded paper. And prepped the silencer. The king dies at sunrise. Verity didn't fight the guards. She let them drag her away. She made her choice. She sacrificed her safety for his truth. And she hoped he could feel it.
Bastian hung from the ceiling. Gravity dragged at his shoulders. Tungsten cuffs ground against his wrist bones. Blood trickled down his forearms. Drip, drip. It didn't matter. The pain in his body was a candle compared to the bonfire in his head. He reached for her. He hunted through the static, searching for the fear he smelled earlier. The fear vanished. Something else replaced it. Hot, sharp, the taste of iron and ozone. Defiance. Bastian gasped. His head snapped up. The heavy collar around his neck hummed with a warning charge. Zzzzt. She said no. He felt the moment she rejected the safety. He felt the snap of the paper, the spike of adrenaline, the absolute terrifying certainty of her loyalty. Her soul answered his. She chose him over herself. She threw away her shield to stand naked in the storm. The wolf stopped pacing. It stopped snarling. It howled. A psychic shockwave rattled the bars of his mind. Mate, savior, mine. Bastian grabbed that feeling. He wrapped his consciousness around her bravery like a blanket. The cell door hissed open. Thorn walked in, disheveled, angry. He clutched a remote. She's stubborn. Thorn spat on the floor. Just like you. But don't worry. She'll watch you die. It will be her final lesson. The air thickened. Bastian didn't roar. He didn't struggle against the chains. He smiled. A slow, bloody baring of teeth. Because of that connection, that thread of defiance Verity spun, fear was gone. Thorn thought he won. Thorn thought he isolated the king. Thorn made the biggest mistake of his life. He gave the king a queen. Bastian closed his eyes. He sent a single thought down the bond. A vow etched into the vibration of his vocal cords. Hold on, little listener. The collar hummed louder, charging the lethal shock for dawn. Bastian didn't care. If they wanted to kill him, they would have to kill the part of him that lived in her chest. And he wasn't going to let that happen. He felt her whisper his name in the dark. Bastian. He let her in. Now it was time to break out.
Darkness weighed a ton. It pressed against Verity's eyes, filling her nose with the stench of black mold and wet stone. Drip, drip, she shivered. They had stripped her coat, her shoes. She curled on the freezing concrete, pulling her knees to her chest. Her bare toes went numb. Stupid, her voice cracked. So stupid. Panic rose in a cold wave. She threw away her career, her safety, her life. For a monster she met once, for a voice she couldn't translate. Hot tears streaked her cold cheeks. Sniff. She was going to die here, alone. An erased footnote. Then the floor shifted, not a sound. A vibration. It started deep in the foundation. Vv-hum. Verity stopped crying. She pressed a palm to the concrete. It wasn't a train. It wasn't random. The vibration traveled up her arm and settled in her chest. Thump, thump, thump. Dum, dum, dum. Dum, dum, dum. Breath hitched in her throat. She knew that rhythm. The syntax she felt on his throat. The pattern of his heartbeat. Verity dragged herself to the ventilation grate in the corner. Rusted iron and stagnant air hit her face. She pressed her ear against the cold metal. Hum, click, click, hum. It traveled through the pipes, through the walls, through the bedrock. He was singing to her. He wasn't roaring in anger. He was purring, a low, steady frequency fighting the panic in her blood. Verity closed her eyes. She forced her lungs to match the rhythm. In, out, in, out. I hear you. She whispered the words into the dark grate. The space between them burned, bridging the concrete and steel. He was telling her to hold on. He was telling her he wasn't gone. Verity wiped her face. She wasn't alone. She pressed her lips to the metal bars and hummed back. A single, high, clear tone harmonizing with his deep bass. The vibration in the floor spiked. Thump. He heard her. Verity smiled. A small, fierce thing in the dark. They took her coat. They took her freedom. But they couldn't take this. She leaned back against the rough wall. Fear evaporated, replaced by cold, hard resolve. If he was fighting, she would fight too.
The arena smelled of unwashed bodies and eager violence. Bastion hung from chains in the center of the Court of Fangs. A marble pit surrounded by tiered seats. The seats filled, shuffle, murmur. Council members arrived in red robes, looking like drops of blood on snow. The sonic dampeners screamed, "We!" A high-frequency needle drilled into Bastion's skull. It made his thoughts sluggish. It made his wolf whimper. They were draining his battery before the main event. Bastion kept his head down. Hair obscured his eyes. He hung limp, playing dead. He wasn't listening to the dampeners. He was listening for her. Heavy iron doors groaned open. Kriak, boom. Two guards dragged a small figure into the harsh light. Verity, tiny, pale, clothes torn, barefoot on the sand. She looked up. Her eyes found him instantly. Across the sand, across the pain. She didn't look broken. She stood straighter. She shook off the guard's grip. She lifted her chin. Her soul answered his silent question. I'm here. Bastion's heart roared. It slammed against his ribs like a sledgehammer. Thorne stepped to the podium. He raised his hands. Silence fell. Citizens, we are gathered to witness justice, to witness the end of the feral king. The crowd cheered. Roar, clap. Thorne pointed a manicured finger at Bastion. But first, a demonstration. The traitor will witness the price of her loyalty. Thorne raised the remote. The silencer control. He pressed the button. Click. White-hot agony exploded in Bastion's neck. The collar activated. A lightning strike shredded his spine. Zizrak! Bastion screamed. Not a roar. A scream of pure nerve-shredding pain. His body convulsed. He thrashed in the chains. Through the haze, he saw Verity scream too. The sound was lost to the torture. But she moved. She didn't run away. She didn't cover her eyes. She ran towards him. Guards tackled her before she made it 5 steps. They pinned her face into the sand. Bastion's vision blurred. The world went gray. The shock cut off. Bastion hung there, gasping. Her. Smoke rose from his skin, carrying the stench of burnt flesh. Weak. Done. Then he heard it. A whisper. Not in his ears. In his head. Get up. Verity. Get up, Bastion. Get up. It wasn't a thought. It was a command. She was using the vocox. She pushed her will into his mind, jump-starting his heart. Strength flooded back into his limbs. Not his strength, hers. He opened his eyes. Gold burned away the gray. A new fire. He looked at Thorn. He looked at the remote. The wolf took over. It smiled. Showtime.
Sand grit between Verity's teeth, tasting of ash and defeat. A heavy boot crushed her cheek into the dirt. The guard suffocated her space, reeking of stale sweat and cracked leather. Stay down, traitor. Thorn's voice boomed over the speakers, distorted and godlike. Behold, the end of the error, the crowd roared. A wall of bloodlust shook the marrow in Verity's bones. She looked up through a haze of dust. Bastion sagged in the chains. Smoke curled from his skin. Done. But his eyes opened. Burning gold. Do it. Scream. Thorn stood behind a massive podium. A silver microphone gleamed. An industrial sonic amplifier. The same system suppressing the wolves now amplified the lie. Verity locked onto that silver mesh ball. If she couldn't stop the signal, she would change the frequency. She sank her teeth into the guard's ankle. Hard. Feral. Ah! Weight lifted. Verity scrambled up. She didn't run from the danger. She sprinted toward it. Bare feet slapped against cold marble. Steps. Slap. Slap. Thorn turned, eyes wide. Stop her! Too late. Verity gripped the iron stand. Cold metal vibrated against her palms, humming with power. No speeches, no mercy. She opened her mouth. She summoned the sound Bastion taught her in the dark. The kill syntax. Pure command, she screamed. Not a human cry. A guttural, clicking tear in the fabric of the air. K-R-A-K-D-K-Sh. Feedback exploded. The speakers shrieked, a high-pitched violence shattering the stadium. The front row clutched their ears. Glass in the VIP box detonated. Thorn dropped the remote, falling to his knees. Blood trickled from his nose. He built the arena to amplify sound. He just handed her the biggest gun in the room. She poured rage, fear, and love into the microphone. She wasn't translating. She was commanding.
Bastion hung in the chains, waiting. Then the sound hit his bones. Crack. The old tongue, alpha command, spoken with a rough, raw human accent. Beautiful. Sonic dampeners overloaded. Sparks showered from the ceiling, smelling of ozone and melting plastic. The silencer collar panicked. Tuned for wolves, not for a human woman cracking stone with her voice. The blue light flickered. Died. Metal snapped. Ping. The collar split, clattering to the sand. The fog in his head lifted. Bastion inhaled. The air tasted of electricity and victory. He flexed his arms. Tungsten cuffs groaned. He wasn't just a wolf. He was a king fueled by his queen. He looked at Verity on the podium, a goddess of vengeance. Power spiked. He roared. A shockwave flattened the air. Chains shattered. Metal shrapnel flew like bullets. Bastion dropped to the sand in a crouch. Predator. Unleashed. The crowd screamed, scrambling over each other to escape. Guards dropped weapons and ran. The king wasn't feral. He was furious. Bastion didn't chase. He turned toward the podium. Thorn crawled across the ground, small and pathetic. Bastion ignored him. Heavy steps shook the ground. Thump. Thump. He stopped at the base of the stairs. He looked up. Verity breathed hard. She held the microphone like a scepter. Blood stained her lips. Bastion knelt, not to Thorn, to her. The beast didn't eat the beauty. The beast bowed to the one who gave him his voice back. He waited for her command. The remaining council froze. The monster wasn't on a leash anymore. He was on a team.
Silence pressed down on the arena, heavy and suffocating. Verity stood on the podium. The adrenaline crash left her shaking. The microphone stand froze her palm, a steel rod that had just shattered a kingdom. Below, the sand glittered with broken glass and twisted metal. The council fled. The guards vanished. Only Thorn remained, a whimpering insect crawling through the dust, small, broken, and Bastion, a mountain of muscle and shadow kneeling in the center of the ruin. His chest heaved. Smoke curled from his neck where the collar had burned him, carrying the sickly sweet scent of seared flesh. Verity let the microphone go. Metal clattered against stone, a final bell tolling. She descended the marble stairs. Bare feet made no sound on the cold floor. She ignored Thorn. She ignored the empty seats, her eyes locked on the Alpha King. He stayed bowed, forehead grazing the sand, a pose of submission that felt like a loaded gun. He wasn't surrendering. He was waiting. Heat rolled off him in waves. The air grew warmer with every step. Ozone, wild musk, a storm that had just broken. Verity stopped in front of him. She reached for a pocket she didn't have. She wore rags. A square of white silk lay in the dirt, a handkerchief dropped by a fleeing noble. She snatched it up, clean, expensive. She reached out. Bastion flinched, a tiny ripple of muscle in his shoulder anticipating a blow, expecting pain. Verity knelt in the sand. She pressed the silk to his cheek, wiping away a smear of blood. Bastion lifted his head. The feral madness was gone. Gold eyes remained, but they were clear, sharp, intelligent. He looked at her hand, then her face. A jolt hit Verity's chest. Not the Vocox vibration, just him. It's over. Her voice was rough, scratchy from the scream. Bastion didn't roar. He didn't snarl. He looked at the ruined collar on the ground, then back to her. He leaned into her touch. His skin burned hot against her palm. Her heart hammered a new rhythm. He wasn't a monster she tamed. He was a partner she unleashed. She wasn't just a translator anymore. She was the other half of the conversation.
The scent of rain washed over the arena, cutting through the copper tang of blood. Bastion stood. He eclipsed the light. Ash and gore coated his skin, a nightmare made flesh. But inside his skull, the silence was beautiful. 5 years of static, screams, noise, gone. Now, only her heartbeat remained. Thump, thump, the steady drum anchoring him to the earth. He looked at Verity. Wrecked, split lip, tangled hair, covered in dust, the most beautiful thing breathing. He reached out. His hand was massive. Claws, sharp as razors, hovered near her face. He could crush her skull with a twitch. He moved with the terrifying gentleness of a ghost. Rough fingertips grazed her jawline. He brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. She didn't flinch. She leaned into the hand, eyes closed. Her soul answered the question he hadn't asked. I am yours. Time. Years spent screaming in a language no one understood. Years pushing complex thoughts into simple growls. She gave him the key. She broke the lock. He cleared his throat, rusty, unused, gravel grinding together. Guards watched from the shadows, terrified, waiting for the howl. Bastion opened his mouth. No wolf tongue, no telepathy, just the clumsy, heavy words of men. You? His voice was a landslide, deep, tectonic. Verity's eyes snapped open. She stared, stunned. You. He forced the syllables past his teeth. Akar, loud. Verity blinked. A wet, choked laugh escaped her. A sob mixed with joy. I had to be. You weren't listening. Bastion smiled, a real smile. Not a threat, but a promise. He leaned close to her ear. Then, keep screaming, little listener. His voice gained strength, rasping like iron on stone. Because we have a lot to say. He scooped her into his arms. She weighed less than a shadow. He turned toward the exit, toward the city that tried to silence him, toward the council running for its life. Every step shook the ground. She let it happen. The king had his voice. The queen had the microphone. The silence was dead.